So, what's up, everybody? Issa Hall here with Tupac. And part of why we're here is to help in a tangible way each individual be able to control their economic outcomes and their economic futures. Okay. And so, one of the things that we really focus on is creating a new generation of entrepreneurs. If you look at most of the, if not all of the richest people on the planet, they are entrepreneurs. They own their own business. And there's a reason for that is because that may be the only gateway that allows you to be the primary beneficiary of money. If you're an employee, the incentive of the owner is going to steer most of the resources to. And so many people find it very difficult to start a business. And for me, as someone who started multiple businesses and I start something new, I call them just projects at this point in time. Probably monthly, I have come to understand that something that I can help people with is generally just getting started in business. And so one of the things that I believe gets in the way of business is that we get swamped with business plans and overthinking starting a business. If you think about what a business simply is, it means that there is some type of supply you have and there's demand for it and somebody's willing to pay you for it. And business does not mean that you are doing it full time. You get to quit your job tomorrow. What business is it's really, it requires practice and it requires stacking all the wealth that you're acquiring. A lot of the wealth that I'm referring to is knowledge and being able to, get a starting point on day one and then adding on to this as you go. That's how you grow and build a business. And so the most important thing when we start a business is just determining what our MVP is. Our MVP is our minimal viable product. And what that means is what is the most minimal version of this that I'm offering, of this service, of this product that can exist, that can validate my assumptions, that somebody is willing to purchase, and that can verify my hypothesis. And so I'm going to give a very tangible example of my newest project. It's a farm coffee shop on my parents' farm that we're going to monetize. And what is the most minimal viable product of what we can do with this farm? Because we want a coffee shop, we want to have cabins, we want a micro distillery, all those things. But what is the most minimal viable? And what we have come to is that through doing some research is that, wait a minute, there's a farm, we can sell produce. So the quickest way for us to generate revenue and validate the market and to just be in business, which I think is the most important thing, is for us to open up and we're going to sell produce. And so for me, the most important thing in business is to actually open your doors, because this is where you're going to start gaining experience. Because as soon as you're in business, and why I personally don't believe in doing too much work on things like business plans and overthinking it, is because as soon as you open your doors, you're going to realize there are things you didn't think about. It doesn't work like that in real life. And there are many variables that are just going to be unaccounted for. And so if you really start simple, like what's the simplest way for you to be in business, you don't have to worry about wasting a lot of time on overthinking assumptions and wasting, money on assumptions and purchases that you made in anticipation of something that has not occurred yet. And so for us to open let's call it a farmer's market on our farm, what does it require? It requires produce, which we already have, and it requires somebody being present to sell it, and an audience, of course. And it costs us, in addition to what we have already established, it costs nothing. And that's what I really want you to understand, is that your basis for a business is actually something that probably already lives within you, something you already have. What is somebody willing to pay you for? What are you interested in? And if you can just whittle that down, like it doesn't require fancy websites and business cards and advertising and social media. Your minimal viable product requires you having some value to offer and somebody willing to purchase it. And I really want you to understand that. So, and if we're building a technology platform, the minimal viable product requires me being able to validate something, and it doesn't require me, fancy software. And that's a mistake I learned early on with trying to build software and then realizing the software I built didn't exactly fit the need of the customer. And also not even understanding that my customer doesn't require software. My customer doesn't require software. And I built something and learned from those mistakes and then realized, wait a minute, email, telephone, spreadsheets can do most of what this software would have done. And all of these things are virtually free, meaning most of us already have these things. And so when we think about our minimal viable product, I want you to don't get, I know these companies and our visions and our dreams and ambitions, show the bells and whistles, the big product. But when I say learn from my mistakes, understand that if on day one you can start a business and you can actually be in business, and that's another thing I want to emphasize, that if you start with a minimal viable product, what I realized was that, for example, on this farm, we want to have a coffee shop. Now, a coffee shop requires me to have certain licenses, even a coffee machine. Okay. Now I'm increasing the level of difficulty for me to be in business. I'm increasing the time that it takes me to be in business, as opposed to understanding that if I am in business, I am actually gaining the most valuable thing, which is experience, instead of waiting. Because regardless of when I start, I'm going to have to go through those growing pains. I'm going to have to learn certain things. So I want you to find the simplest format for you to actually start a business, be in business, and now we can be in business. So if you are a barber and you cut hair, you don't need to wait for a barber shop to cut hair. You can cut hair just by having clippers in your time. If you are starting a platform, a digital tech platform, you don't need fancy software. You need a customer and the ability to solve a problem. That's it. That's all your customers need. I think back to when I became an attorney. I did not need a fancy office and, business cards and things of that nature. I needed email, really, to seem professional, to show you have a professional appearance. I didn't need a fancy office. I just needed the ability to solve my customers' problems. So I needed my law degree, my law license. I got that. But all those other things were not necessary for me to be a practicing attorney. So I want you to really focus on that. What is the smallest, lightest version of actually being in business? If you're ready to do that, and honestly, if you need some help with that, please, send me a message, contact me. But if you're ready to do that, you're in business. Stop making it so complicated. Stop making it so difficult, because I promise, once you actually get in business, you'll very quickly realize that most of the things you thought you needed aren't things you actually need. And they're definitely not things your customer need. So anyway, get working on your business and reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. Peace.